Today is May 5th, 2020, and I call this brief episode Special Report from the Lockdown. Last night I woke up in a sweat. I'd had a nightmare where my husband and I were being run out of our home. It felt very apocalyptic. The look and feel of the dream suggested to me that the world was ending. Now, I can't remember much specifically about the dream, just that we were being run out of our home into a harsh and unforgiving and dark world. The home itself wasn't the one we have. It looked foreign. So that tells me that this was all metaphorical. That dream, though, woke me up in a start, and I laid there in the dark, sweating and staring at the ceiling, feeling panicked. Which has compelled me to write this. I need to talk about this, if for no other reason than to make sense of it for myself. For those who haven't listened to my podcasts, I'll give you a little background information. My mother, who I refer to as Miss Ann, was a little bit crazy. After my dad died, she married a man who was, well, shall we say, unsuitable. It was a long-distance courtship. We lived in Kansas. He lived in Oklahoma. The courtship was short, 3 months, and this marriage dragged us from the only home we knew to Oklahoma City. Once there, we found out that the new husband was an alcoholic drug addict and wife beater who was, well, in a word, crazy. What was even crazier was that Miss Ann had dated him and gotten pregnant by him 20 years before, and she still thought it was a good idea to marry him. My sisters and I were dragged along on this roller coaster of crazy. He and Miss Ann would fight, then we kids would have to hate him, then she'd make up with him, then we kids would have to love him. He was the enemy, and then he wasn't. Our feelings had to whipsaw back and forth to accommodate the shifting reality of the day. Believe your eyes, or believe what Miss Ann said. My way of coping with the crazy situation was to make things. I had a dollhouse I worked on, and I also made Barbie clothes. Did I get shit because of it? Absolutely I did. I was a sissy boy in Oklahoma, getting bullied all day in school, and then navigating the emotional landmines at home. That was my life then. I refer to it sometimes as dances with landmines. So I made Barbie clothes. There was such an escape there for me, focusing on something so tiny. In my mind, Barbie was 27, lived in a big city, went to the opera, she went to theater and restaurants and only owned evening clothes. Making different outfits, looking at the fabrics, choosing something pretty, while inventing the backstory in my mind, it took my mind off my daily reality. In short, it was my escape. Working on her wardrobe, in a way, was me preparing for where I desperately wanted to be, which was not in this crazy situation being dragged along by these crazy people. Miss Ann's lawyer, Harry, the voice of reason in my teenage years, put it into words for me. He took me aside one day and said that while life sucked right then, all I needed to do was last. Then one day, I could choose to get away. I desperately wanted to be a grown-up, so I could choose not to be dragged along at the whims of crazy people. Eventually, I did just that. I left. Years later, I was helping my friend Mark escape an abusive relationship. Doing this showed me another iteration of crazy. In that situation, I learned that you can't predict what they will do, nor plan for it. You just know that it's gonna be fucking crazy. I was constantly amazed at the things his ex would come up with, and I learned that no one should never willingly engage with a crazy person. They have no shame, they have no conscience, and they will wear down everyone in their path. There's no defending against them. If you can get away, but once they set their sights on you, you're fucked. My friend Mark died just to get away. So here we are, right now, May 6th, 2020. The day after the election in 2016, I went to bed paralyzed by a blind panic. My husband was really concerned with my reaction. I explained to him that I'd seen this before. I had experience with crazy. There was no way I could predict what exactly Trump would do, but it would be a shitstorm. That was certain. Unpredictable, crazy shitstorm. So watching this pandemic wash over the world, and more specifically over the United States, while shocking and frightening, hasn't been surprising to me. That Trump tossed out all of the infrastructure to deal effectively with it wasn't surprising either. Nor is it surprising that this is continuing unabated, with nobody on the Republican side daring to say, enough! Watching his supporters reminds me of Miss Anne after another of the all-night bouts of drunkenness and abuse. In the morning, we kids were expected to act like it didn't happen, to embrace him like he was some sort of great guy, to ignore the evidence of our own eyes. I want to ask these people, what do you see? How deep is your denial that you can watch how he's handling this and think that it's okay? Please explain it to me if you can. It doesn't make any sense. To me, it's just like watching Miss Anne and Mark's crazy ex. Crazy. So now I'm making Barbie clothes again to deal with being dragged along by this crazy. Making these tiny clothes is soothing in the same way it was before. Now I have more skill, so the outfits can be more beautiful. And I take pleasure in doing it. Like when I was young, the focus on something so small allows my mind to blot out the wider world for a while. But as this wears on, I accept that I will have more panic, more nightmares. I go back to what Harry said all those years ago. He said that while life sucked right then, all I needed to do was last. Then one day, I could choose to get away. As I'm older now, and we have no idea of when that day will come, somewhere I need to summon up the strength to just last. But it's exhausting, because this is so much bigger than me. I look out at the world, and it seems there are two parallel universes, the faux news bubble and the real world. Denial and accepting facts. It looks to me just like my adolescence. Miss Anne getting beaten, then acting like nothing had happened, even though we could see the bruises. It was crazy. There's no answer or words of wisdom here, just one person trying to make sense of a crazy situation as best I can. So I make more Barbie clothes and work as best I can to change things by making masks for loved ones, encouraging my students at FIT to vote, checking in on my friends, and donating money to candidates who I think could do some good. It's all I can do right now.